Today we continue our series on the new Dark Souls Sunless City core set with the review of this iconic set, which has a lot of similarities with the original Dark Souls board game from a few years ago. On this video we'll give a quick gameplay overview, the review of the new set and the changes from the OG board game. We go through the treasure cards, the combat, the 3 things we liked and disliked about it, and we're also going to be answering some of our followers' questions. Hi, I'm Nick from Tabletop Duo. Grab your favorite drink and let's start with a quick overview of the gameplay. In Sunless City you explore an Orlando with 3 players playing one of the following characters from the video game. The Pyromancer, specialist in magic and fire attacks, the Warrior, a strong DPS focused on physical attacks, or the Herald, character that can heal the players and tank some attacks. The game's campaign is split in 10 encounters and your goal is to reach the throne room and defeat Ornstein and Smough, everyone's favorite Dark Souls duo battle bosses. Each encounter has an objective players must complete and sometimes special rules that change the combat dynamics. If players complete the objectives, they get rewards like equipment and souls, which are used to level up your character's stats, and buy more equipment from Blacksmith Andre. And you can also double down on rewards if you complete secondary objectives called trials. Like in Dark Souls video game, the combat is ruthless. All the enemies activate in between each player's turn, so strategic positioning and prioritizing your target is key. Players can move around the board and attack with physical or magical weapons and spells and must carefully choose how to approach an enemy as they are usually strong versus physical or magical attacks. Most weapons and spells have 2 types of attacks, light and heavy, which consume different amounts of stamina filled at the bottom section of your character's board. Each character has a limited special ability they can use. They also have an Estus Flask to recover health and stamina, and a lucky coin to reroll a die. Sometimes you might find terrain objects like barrels, tombstones and chests, which can be opened for extra treasures. You must be careful though, as some scenarios have a mimic, and if you happen to open a chest with them, you have to fight a tougher opponent. The game also contains events that work mostly like modifiers on top of an encounter, either helping or making the player's life more difficult. After all, it's Dark Souls. If a player dies during an encounter, players fail the scenario and must start from the first encounter all over again. But some scenarios might give shortcuts to players which serve as checkpoints, so players can restart from those scenarios instead of all the way back from the beginning. Each time a battle is lost, players decrease their bonfire spark dial, and if the dial reaches 0, it's game over. When the players reach the 5th level encounter, they fight a mini-boss, the Titanite Demon, and at the 10th encounter they face Ornstein and Smough. Boss fights are the highlight of the game. Bosses have their own behavior deck, moving and attacking as the cards dictate, and the combat gets a spin once the boss's health is reduced to its hit-up value. Stronger attacks are added to the deck and the order is reshuffled, forcing the player to learn the order again. And that's Dark Souls Sunless City gameplay in a nutshell. Now let's jump into our review. A disclaimer about the review is that I will do it from 2 points of view. The first point of view is from new players interested in playing the board game for the first time, and the second point of view is from the board game enthusiasts. Let's start by talking about the characters you can play with. For this core set we get the Warrior and the Herald, which have not been seen since the OG game, and we also get the Pyromancer, which is a playable character from the Tomb of Giants core set. It's good to see both Warrior and Herald in their updated versions, and overall these 3 characters play well, but it would have been good to see the Pyromancer replaced with the Knight so that each new core set would have a unique set of characters to play. Their unique loot is the same as the OG game, so no new items. The only updated item is the Tiny Beans ring, which you can see on screen. You will notice through this review that all the characters are painted, but they don't come like that in the box. Mari did a few painting tutorials, so if you want to paint them, check the links on this video's description. Next, let's talk about the campaign. The campaign is really fun, with each encounter having their own objectives, numbers of rooms, and special rules. Some of these rules include finding secret rooms, going through 2 rooms full of enemies and traps, fighting monsters while a huge boar is chasing you, doing certain objectives within a certain amount of turns, and reaching an exit node while walking on a flooded fortress that hinders your movement. Typical Dark Souls chores. In the OG game, encounters felt very repetitive, as the only variation used to be the enemies you fight on each encounter. But now, every time you play the campaign, it's a unique set of encounters waiting for you, and some of them even take 3 tiles. Talking about enemies on this set, you get 3 hollow soldiers, 3 crossbow hollows, 2 silver knight swordsmen, 2 silver knight great bowmen, 1 sentinel and 1 mimic. Those enemies are fun to fight, but except for the crossbow hollow that does magical damage, the others attack with physical damage. These are the same enemies from the original board game, with the exception of the heavy hollow that was removed from the core set and the addition of the mimic. Personally, I like the addition of the mimic as it brings a twist to the encounters. As if you open a chest in the scenario flagged with the mimic, you might have to fight this powerful enemy instead of gaining the chest's treasure. But if you win the fight, you get double treasures. So it's a risk versus reward choice players must make to spice things up a little bit. On top of the objectives, enemies and special rules, we have the event cards. They go from giving things that will spice up combat, like increasing the damage or giving poison ability to each enemy in exchange for extra souls at the end of the combat, from rewards that will give you an extra motivation, like free stats upgrades, character abilities being refilled, and extra chances to get more treasures. For these reasons, encounters will be fun to play no matter how many campaigns you played. Events will feel good for new players and Dark Souls board game enthusiasts alike. Regarding the treasures, we get a good variety, allowing players to customize their characters the way they want if you have enough stats to be able to equip them. You get all of these treasures from the OG game, plus 6 treasures from the Explorers expansion, 3 from the Phantoms expansion, 3 from the Characters expansion, and 1 from the Asylum Demon Megaboss. And these are the legendary treasure cards. Now, if you want to sleeve the cards, you're gonna need the taro size for the encounter cards. You're also gonna need the 63.5 by 88 for the behavior cards. And you're gonna need the 41 by 63 for the treasure cards. If it's your first time playing, that's a nice ensemble of treasures, but if you have played the OG game, I was expecting a few new treasures. The game comes with 4 double-sided boards that serve as regular and boss encounters. They have updated the board nodes with the directions players can go once they reach a node, which is a great addition for new players. Next, let's talk about one of the highlights in the game, the boss fights. Fighting bosses in Dark Souls board game is fun as hell. The bosses move a lot on the board and positioning is key as they attack from different arcs. Ornstein and Small duo combat is fun, and depending on who you kill first will buff the other and introduce a new deck of attacks just like in the video game. Once the bosses reach critical health, they heat up, adding new cards to their deck, changing all the patterns you have learned so far. This makes the boss fights always unique, and both bosses and mini-boss that come with this core set are great. My only complaint about the core set having the OG board game is not having mini-boss and bosses variations. Now let's get to the 3 things we liked and disliked about the board game. Starting with the things we liked, the first one is the campaign design. The game comes with a variation of encounters on all difficulties, with different objectives, special rules and trials. On top of that, we get event cards that add extra modifiers to them, and this makes each campaign unique and fun to play. Encounters never become repetitive, which used to be a problem in the vanilla game. The second thing we liked is the overall boss combat and the selection of boss and mini-boss for this set. It's fun to fight against them, and every battle feels different from another because of random aspects of the behavior deck. The Titanite Demon's mid-ranged combat is fun, sometimes he leaps over the character, so that's really cool. And the duo fight against Ornstein and Small is also really fun, and one of the unique fight dynamics among the other Dark Souls board game bosses. And the third thing that we liked is the loot and the reward loop in the game. It's fun getting new treasures, they come in good quantities and support the creation of a variety of builds. This is important, especially if you tried the vanilla game, as the loot and rewards loop was not that good, often giving items you didn't want and creating cases where you would stay several encounters without finding anything good to equip. The first thing that we didn't like are the changes to the tokens that mark the stamina and damage on the player's dashboard. Damage and stamina are added to the dashboard all the time, and the cardboard tokens miss the mark on that spot. If you put them back into the slots, they are hard to remove, often requiring to pick the board and punch them again, and over time they start to wear off because of the friction. The original set used to have cubes, which were more practical for match dynamics. And the second thing we didn't like is that they added the Pyromancer to this set, which was already present on the Tomb of Giants. I think it's a missed opportunity to have each set with unique characters to differentiate each core set even more. Kinda like what Steamforged Games did with the Monster Hunter World board game, where each set comes with 4 unique hunters. We have done a review for Tomb of Giants, so click on the link above in case you have not checked it out. The third thing that we didn't like is only valid if you have the OG set and the expansions. Otherwise, just ignore this one. So the third thing we didn't like is that all the treasures are from the OG game and a few old expansions. So if you already have them, there are no new treasures to pursue. Now you must be asking, what do you think about this core set? Should I buy it? If you're a new player to the board game, my answer is definitely, you should buy it. This is a great core set with awesome characters, enemies and iconic bosses, with a fun replayable campaign that will give you all you need to get introduced to the board game series. If you have the OG game, but you have not bought any of the new core sets yet, I would also recommend buying it. The campaign board, events and encounter cards make a huge difference on the gameplay. I know some people don't like printing those, and that's okay. But for me, I like to have the retail level of quality of the components. Now, if you have the OG game and one of the new core sets, whether it's the Painted World of Ariamis or the Tomb of Giants, I would say no. There are no major changes for this set, so your OG game cards, enemies and bosses will work, so all you need to do is replace the enemies from the encounters with the enemies from the OG game. Next, we're gonna start unboxing and reviewing the reprint of the old Iron King Mega Boss expansion. Stay tuned! Thanks for watching and see you next time! Bye!